Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Terry's back with us now, having visited the Eternal City.
Yes.
You've been to Rome?
Went to Rome for a week. I had never been, so it was very interesting. The Colosseum, the Forum, the Pantheon, the
you did all
Fountain
those
Trevi, all those things. But the most interesting thing to me was I went to this place called the Mamertine Prison, where they say that Paul and Peter were both imprisoned there. And I was taken with how rough it was. I mean, you know, I just don't think sometimes in our imaginations we understand how much they suffered for their faith in those days. So that was a wonderful trip, you know, great time with my sister and some dear friends.
You look all refreshed and revived. I'm just delighted.
It's the pasta.
The pasta did it?
No. I knew better.
Okay. But anyhow, the Italians do have good food, if you know.
Good food, beautiful city, lovely people. But it's, you know, the best part of going still for me is always coming back home. I mean, it's beautiful here. We have good food too.
It's so good to see you, and glad you're well.
It's good to be back, Pat.
Well, it looks like the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, was really turning the screws on the Iranians. He says, listen, here are the rules now. You're going to do this, 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 and this. And he laid out a whole menu of actions he wants them to take. And if he doesn't do it, you're going to have the toughest sanctions that ever been put on any country in history. And the Europeans are faced with the fact, well, yes, they have trade with Iran, but their major trade is with the United States. And so those companies like Total and others, there'll be sanctions on them if they break the sanctions with Iran. So who knows? Maybe they'll behave themselves for a change. But it's time for the United States to get tough, and we are getting tough. It's also time, it looks like, to get the facts. That's what the Vice President, Mike Pence, says about the ongoing Russia investigation. Now that it seems it all began because the FBI had actually been spying on the Trump campaign.
Well, Pence has also called for the investigation to end. Now the Justice Department is opening up. They've agreed to share classified information about the Russia probe with members of Congress. Charlene Aaron has the story.
The White House says the FBI and officials from the Department of Justice will meet with congressional leaders to review highly classified material on the Russia investigation. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and FBI Director Christopher Wray met with the president Monday after his call for an investigation into whether the FBI or the Department of Justice used an informant to spy on his 2016 campaign. The New York Times reports that the FBI sent a confidential informant to speak to Trump campaign advisors who had made suspicious contacts with the Russians before the election. In an interview on Fox News, Vice President Mike Pence said the American people have a right to know what happened.
The Inspector General has the resources to get to the bottom of it. He's been working on a major report about the FBI's conduct, and by expanding into this role, we're very confident that we'll get to the bottom of it, we'll find out what happened, and the American people and all of us will have the facts.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer suggests there is no evidence that the FBI sent a spy into the Trump campaign.
That he would issue such an absurd and abusive demand based on no evidence shows just how little regard the president has for the rule of law.
The vice president also stood by his call that special counsel Robert Mueller end his investigation into potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia during the 2016 election.
We have fully cooperated in this investigation. As I said, over 1 million documents have been provided. And I just said, for the sake of the country, and I think it's time that the special counsel wrap it up. And I think that's probably an opinion widely shared by people all across America.
White House Chief of Staff John Kelly will arrange the meeting between congressional leaders and the DOJ to review the materials. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, there's a whole new tenor coming out of the State Department. The Obama administration deal with Iran has completely been repudiated. And his first speech as Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, sent a strong warning, as I said earlier, to Iran. Ephraim Graham has that story.
Pat, Mike Pompeo warned Iran's leaders to change course or face the strongest sanctions ever. Our national security correspondent Eric Rosales explains.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gave his first major foreign policy address here at Washington, D.C.'s Heritage Foundation. The secretary presented the new U.S. strategy on dealing with Iran after President Trump's withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal.
As President Trump said 2 weeks ago, he is ready, willing, and able to negotiate a new deal. But the deal is not the objective. Our goal is to protect the American people.
Pompeo listed 12 demands that would be the framework for a potential new treaty with Iran. They include Iran fully disclosing and permanently abandoning its nuclear weapons program, ending its ballistic missile program, and allowing inspectors access to all nuclear sites, including military locations which were off limits under the 2015 deal.
Iran must release all U.S. citizens, as well as citizens of our partners and allies, each of them detained on spurious charges.
Pompeo characterized Iran as an international menace that must end all support of terrorists such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Islamic Jihad.
The length of the list is simply a scope of the malign behavior of Iran. We didn't create the list, they did.
The secretary said the U.S. will also ask Europe to reimpose economic sanctions in a bid to bring Iran back to the negotiating table. If they don't join the U.S., some see that as a costly choice.
If they continue taking their rhetoric to the most logical conclusion, that means they would be willing to side with the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism as opposed to the world's best economy.
America's enemies must understand that the United States will stand up to those who threaten the free world.
Reaction came swift from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He said anyone who wants to stop Iranian aggression and support peace should support the United States just like Israel does. While a spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry called the new policy ridiculous and embarrassing and more like a satire. Secretary Pompeo says the U.S. demands are not unreasonable, yet welcomes Iran's leaders to take a different path. He adds it's ultimately up to the Iranian people to decide their future. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Strong words from the Secretary of State. Pat?
Well, I concur with Mike Pompeo. He's going to be a tremendous Secretary of State. The thing of it is he's right at one with the president, and they, along with the Bolton, the foreign policy advisor that's in there, it's the tough team, and it's time the United States flex its muscles. We've got power, and it's time we use it. Now, I want to shift from the current to the Bible. The Bible in Ezekiel chapter 37, 38 talks about what's going to happen in the latter days. And it says a coalition that's going to come against Israel in the latter days. It will include something called Gog and Magog, and it'll also include something called Rosh. Of course, Rosh means the head, but it also could be Russia. And the Caucasian nations that border Turkey. Now, who is Rosh? Who is Gomer and so forth? It's Turkey. All of those things, Gog and Magog, took place in Turkey. And there's a coalition that will involve Persia, Iran, it'll involve Turkey, involve Russia, and maybe even the Sudan. It's coming against Israel in the latter days, and God says, I'm going to destroy it on the mountains of Israel, and then I'll show that I am the Lord. Now, that's what the Bible says. Now, who is beginning to stir around? Turkey used to be a very strong ally of Europe. It was called the sick man of Europe, but nevertheless, the old Ottoman Empire was turned into a democratic nation, and it has now shifted to Erdogan, who is a dedicated Muslim, who says that there should be sanctions now against Israel. He's calling on Islamic states to rise up against Israel and take a stand against them. Now, that's Gog and Magog, and it's in the Bible. So with Turkey coming into that orbit, the stars, if I can use the term, are aligning to see the biblical truth come to pass. Now, Ephraim has more about what that Erdogan is saying.
Pat, Turkey's president is threatening economic retaliation against Israel after some 50 members of Hamas were killed attacking the border fence in Gaza last week. Recep Erdogan says his government will review its economic and trade relationship with Israel following elections in Turkey next month. He also called on the Organization of Islamic States, a group of 57 nations, to follow up on its decision last week to boycott Israel. Foreign journalists arrived in North Korea to observe the closing of a nuclear test site, but the South Korean media was left out. Closing the facility is seen as a display of goodwill before next month's scheduled summit between Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump. But the exclusion of South Korea is a troubling sign. Kim Jong-un has threatened to pull out of the summit over demands it get rid of its nuclear weapons. Later today, President Donald Trump meets with the president of South Korea at the White House. The 17-year-old student who killed 10 people at a Santa Fe, Texas high school reportedly studied other school shootings. Despite the school having 2 armed officers on duty, the shooter managed to kill 8 students and 2 teachers.
2 officers that engaged that individual within 4 minutes, or approximately 4 minutes. They're heroes. They contained him in that one area, isolated to them, engaging with them, so he did no more damage.
Earlier this week, the town held a moment of silence at 10 a.m. to remember those victims. With the rise of community colleges and a new emphasis on vocational skills, the nature of secondary education is changing. CBN's Washington correspondent Abigail Robertson recently sat down with a lawmaker who is offering a reform bill to meet the needs of potential students.
Congresswoman Virginia Foxx is no stranger to how student loans can burden college graduates. A young student with no money, she didn't think she'd make it past high school. But now as a House chairwoman, she's fighting to make things easier for generations to come.
I consider it all lots of acts of God that I am where I am.
In high school, Foxx worked as a janitor to make money. Ranked number 3 in her class, but without financial means, she had no plans to further her education until a teacher recommended junior college. She did, and against all odds, Foxx went on to earn both a master's degree and doctorate, eventually becoming president of a local community college.
Well, what I tell young people, that if someone like I can do what I've done, then they have no limits.
Foxx wanted to pursue education, but God had other plans. Her personal hardships prepared her to lead efforts in education reform in Washington.
We think it's time.
The new bill, known as the Prosper Act, focuses on helping people obtain any post-secondary education, from trade certificates to bachelor degrees, and getting them into the workforce.
Post-secondary education should be focused on students and what are the needs of the students. And we believe that's what the Prosper Act does.
In a break with the past, this bill would make financial aid available for programs as short as 10 weeks and pushes schools to be more upfront about costs and benefits.
We want program level information, what it's going to cost, what are their chances of getting a job, what are they likely to make.
And she felt it important to protect freedom of speech and religious liberty on all campuses. While both parties agree reform is needed, Democrats are unlikely to support the bill as it stands. Some are unhappy with grants and loans it eliminates, plus the boost they say it provides career colleges. Reforming higher education is clearly a challenge, given Congress hasn't moved the needle since 1965. Chairwoman Foxx says with millions of unfilled jobs and $1 trillion in student debt, we can no longer afford to just kick the can down the road. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
She is certainly one to watch. Pat?
Well, I am the chancellor of a 10,000 plus student university that has doctoral degrees, master's degrees, baccalaureate degrees, etc. And I'm all in favor of that, but at the same time, I recognize, and I think we all should recognize, that there are a whole lot of people in our society that really shouldn't be going to college. They don't need instruction in some of the things that they learn in college. what they need are the skills to pursue a trade. And one thing that I'm concerned about, and we're starting at Regent University, is a certificate as a cyber specialist. And we can train somebody in a few months to be a specialist, and by doing so, there are at least 1 million jobs available right now in cyber security. And if you have a cyber specialist certificate, then that person is qualified to get into the workplace, and the salaries are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And when they do it, they're not loaded down with all kinds of student debt. So this initiative, this Prosper Act, is very, very important. And it's time that the Democrats and others wake up to the fact that this is what's happening. And we have burdened our students with, it's close to $1 trillion, $1 trillion in student debt. Why are they taking on these debts? Well, they take on a 4-year college with subjects that they don't really need. Now, some people do. They want in the management levels, they need these higher levels of education. They need to be taught to think and make decisions, and that's very important. But there are a whole lot of people in our society who could get along just as well going to community college and getting a certificate that will enable them to get into the workforce. And I might add something. I think it's time that we ought to congratulate our Washington reporter, our Capitol Hill reporter, Abigail Robertson, who happens to be getting married this Saturday.
This Saturday? How wonderful.
Saturday,
well,
to
that's
a very fine young man who happens to be working as a supervisor in Chase Manhattan Bank.
Wonderful. J.P.
Morgan Chase.
Yeah, well, congratulations, Abigail.
Well, Abigail, she's lovely, and I'm proud of Abigail. She's a lovely, lovely person, and she's been a good reporter, and I hope that he will not take her away from us.
Consider that warning.
Okay. Ephraim, back to you.
All the best to Abigail, indeed. Concerns are rising on Hawaii's Big Island as the volcano continues to spill lava into the ocean, creating plumes of dangerous chemicals. Officials say the laze is full of hydrochloric acid and fine particles of volcanic glass. More evacuations have been ordered as officials warn of lung, eye, and skin irritation to anyone who comes in direct contact with it. At least 22 cracks have opened up and many buildings destroyed by a 4-mile river of lava since the eruptions began 2.5 weeks ago. Unbelievable pictures, Pat.
It is unbelievable. The people living there, they're really suffering. But what I've showed you before, the so-called Ring of Fire, it's seismically active all the way. You start at Indonesia, come all the way up into the Aleutians and all that area. But it goes, of course, through Hawaii. There it is. And you see all the way down to South America. And that, of course, the thing that is most active in terms of the United States is the so-called Cascadia region. That would be Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and so forth. There, the Pacific plate will intersect with the North American plate at that point. And there's an article, I need to get the lady who wrote the thing, is an excellent article about that so-called Cascadia effect that will take place underneath the Pacific Northwest and will bring about devastating tsunamis. So,
well, we've seen in the past when something happens in one place in that Ring of Fire,
when it starts, those plates start moving. And is Hawaii? Well, Hawaii, those islands actually came up out of the ocean, and they rose up because of volcanic activity, and you know it's happening. But boy, I just hope and pray that there'll be some people taking care of those folks in Hawaii because it's serious.